Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for all coming back here in a timely fashion. I know that was pretty cool. I was, been up to the house for a bunch of times, but it never gets old. So it's always fun. So today we have a panel of four of our colleagues here, and this is sort of to give you guys a little bit of an idea of who works here on a staff level, what they do, and then also how to get some of these jobs. There really is no one particular path to working in Congress. There's tens of thousands of staff members that work here in a variety of functions. So this will be as conversational as possible, but I just want to start off here. So if you wouldn't mind rising for the people in the back as well, and then maybe just spend 2 minutes talking, introduce yourself, and then say what your role is here. Starting with you.
All right, my name is Emily Barrett. I am the Director of Operations for Speaker Pelosi. I've been on the Hill for about almost 7 years now. I actually found this job on a listserv, and Michael was one of the people that interviewed me for the job. So I basically do a mix of working on her and running her executive office team. I travel with the Speaker both domestically and mostly internationally. And just basically anything you think of like if you watch Veep, I'm like Gary. Basically, the easiest way to describe my job. But I absolutely love it, and I couldn't imagine being anywhere but the House right now. Before this, I came to the Washington Center in the fall of 2010. I was an intern at the White House in the Obama administration at the time. I was there before I came over here, so it was a nice experience of two branches. And I also went to Alvernia University for my undergrad, and I know that's Nellie's here, and she's at Alvernia now. And they have a great partnership with the Washington Center, so I absolutely love coming and talking to groups like you guys.
All right, for the fourth time, my name is Michael Long. I am an Elon University graduate. 2004 graduate, and I came to the Washington Center with the College Plus One program. After I graduated, I actually did a semester with an education lobbyist, and I did 2 years off the Hill as a lobbyist, lobbying for nonprofits when we were allowed to do earmarks. I was securing funding for zoos, museums, and aquariums. And I did that for about 2 years. Then I wanted to come on the Hill for a Hill experience, and I actually accidentally stumbled into the position. I started as a staff assistant under Speaker Pelosi the first time she was Speaker, and I actually got it from a college friend's ex-boyfriend's cousin. I had an informational interview, and then a couple of months later he called me for a real interview. I'm currently the Director of Member Services and Senior Advisor. My job is to support the institution and its members, and specifically our Democratic members and their staffs gaining resources, hiring, answering questions, dealing with their day-to-day. I also am the staff director for the Steering and Policy Committee, which is an ad hoc committee for the Democrats, where we assign committee assignments for the entire caucus, and we also help lead which works the word steering, lead the caucus when it comes to messaging and legislation. And I'm also a bit of the jack of all trades of the office, so anything that doesn't fall into a neat category usually falls between me and my team, and we always get it done. We're starting to name ourselves the Solutions Department, so you always can find a solution with my team here.
Hi, my name is Moses Ayala. I am a political compliance manager at Aristotle International. We are a compliance firm that we pretty much handle campaign finance and lobbying law. So a lot of stuff of what I do with the Hill is that I have a lot of lobbyists who come here. I help pretty much make sure that they report everything, or if they're going to do events with elected officials here, that they're in compliance with the law. And so sometimes I play the good cop, and sometimes I play the bad cop when I need to tell them what they can and can't do. I'm a native from Buffalo, New York. I went to Syracuse University for law school. I went to University of Rochester for undergrad. During my time at the Washington Center, I interned for Dave McKinley, who's West Virginia 1. And prior to my position at Aristotle, I was associate counsel at the Republican Governors Association. So I helped out in their 2016, 17, 18 elections. And so 16 was really good. 17, and then 18, we lost a couple, but, still got the majority, so I think I did a pretty good job. And yeah, that's all about me.
Hi, my name is Laura Yetter. I am the Communications Director and Foreign Policy Advisor for Congressman Scott Perry. You've probably never heard of him, it's okay. He is a congressman from Pennsylvania. He represents parts of York, Harrisburg, and Hershey, so we get a lot of Hershey's chocolate in our office. In that role, what I do is I design the congressman's communications, so what that means is anything from his tweets to his Facebook. He somehow has an Instagram. He's not proficient at it at all, but he doesn't quite understand what it means. And also doing interviews for him. So if someone reaches out and wants him on a TV show, I'm the one that they talk to and I get him there. I also, the other side of my portfolio is foreign policy. For the past 3 years, I was the legislative assistant for him, handling the Foreign Affairs Committee where he sat. So in that job, I took meetings, designed questions for him for hearings, gave him background briefings, and did the whole spiel that you do as legislative assistant. I joined the Washington Center in 2012 for the Republican National Convention, where I was placed with the Dallas Morning News. We'll get into this later of how my career kind of took off from there. But I'm a native of Pennsylvania. I went to the George Washington University for undergrad, and after that I joined the Hill and have kind of worked my way up from there.
Great, thank you. So what you just heard is a really interesting kind of cross-section of work on the Hill and sort of work kind of just offside the Hill. And this is a question for Moses and Laura. Could you guys maybe sketch out a little bit about sort of the daily workings of a just rank and file member's personal office? Leadership offices have their own, that's their own particular beast, as I'm sure you can agree, but as you're looking for a position on the Hill, there are more openings in members' personal offices. That's their office here in DC, and I was hoping you guys could sketch out a little bit about kind of the different roles and sort of what what goes on there on a day-to-day basis.
I think this is on, so we can sit. So every day in an office is different. There's no 2 days that are the same, and your role is going to change day to day. So most offices have about 6 to 8 employees in DC. You have generally a staff assistant who handles phone calls, who handles walk-ins. You have a legislative correspondent who's responsible for writing letters from the congressman's position to constituents, and then you generally have 3 to 4 policy staff, and then 1 communications director. So your day-to-day depends a lot on the congressman's schedule. Some days he'll have 3 to 4 hearings, depending on the schedule. And you may be an LC or a staff assistant and having to run over and take him to a hearing or bring a meeting to him. And as communications director, my days are generally chaotic, especially as of recently with everything going on the Hill. So for example, yesterday, from my perspective, not only did we have the impeachment articles obviously traveling from the House to the Senate, but we also had USMCA passed in the Senate headed to the president's desk. Those are 2 big talking points coming out of DC that people in our district care about. So that we had a lot of interview requests coming in, we had a lot of social media going out, and it's my job to make sure that we're timely and we're kind of on message of what the congressman's perspective is to his constituents.
Yeah, just to kind of, my involvement is pretty much more dealing with those who are going to meet with Congress, both men and women. And so I have to basically make sure if they're going to meet with someone who in their office, I got to make sure if they're going to give them, they got to abide by the gift rules. You can't buy them a cup of coffee. Like it's very strict as to what you can and can't give to a member of Congress. So my job is kind of dealing with the day-to-day stuff, is making sure that when they attend these meetings is that they're conforming to the gift rules done by either the Senate or the House. So like I said, it's when I get to tell them either good news or bad news, and they certainly don't like it when it's bad news. But in terms of, from what I remember from what my experience was, is that I just remember the day-to-day kind of me answering the phones and then doing all the stuff, handling constituent stuff. The worst thing I think that I remember was that whenever you see on the TV or anywhere like in the media was call your congressman, is that was literally the worst thing just for me as an intern, because I was picking up the phones constantly, just trying to write all this stuff down. And I'm sure y'all can attest to that as well. So in terms of that, and then managing kind of just getting that info, tracking it down on a day-to-day basis, and then making sure that the other staff would either respond if it was a certain issue that the Congress member was passionate about, and then dealing with that. So I guess I'm sure that your 4 interns don't like that either.
And actually, Laura, I want to focus on something that you had mentioned. So you had said that the phrase LC. So that's, anyone know what that stands for? LC. Anyway, legislative correspondent, which some people think is a chore. I think it's actually quite a cool role. So it's a role basically writing a lot of constituent correspondence to constituents, voters that write in. Could you talk a little bit about, and this is for anybody who wants to take it, about writing, about sort of what kind of writing is expected of you, and kind of how you are able to craft a message that's, that really hits the mark.
The communicator first.
So writing is critical, and that's not just for the communications director or press secretary or anyone communicating. As a legislative staffer, like I was for the past couple of years, you need to be able to write. I can go a little bit more into my background. So when I started college, I was a journalism major. And so when I joined the Washington Center in Tampa in 2012, I was placed with the newspaper, and I thought that was my dream. I thought I was gonna come out of college and be chasing down Speaker Pelosi or anyone else in the halls and asking them questions, but my experience with the Washington Center completely flipped that on its head. I had the chance to interview Senator Ted Cruz, who wasn't a senator at the time, in Tampa, and I realized I don't want to be on that side of things, I want to be on the other. But the thing that being a journalism major taught me is you have to be able to write. If you cannot communicate with your office, even in emails, it's just not possible here. And to have clear communication is so critical, and that's something that I would preach to you guys to really work on. Is if you don't think your writing is kind of up to snuff and people get confused when you write emails or you communicate with them verbally, that's something that really needs to be worked on. And then in terms of crafting a message, it just comes with knowing the landscape. Reading the news and seeing kind of what people are saying, knowing what your boss thinks, what he's thought in the past, and you have to kind of put that all together and use some critical thinking sometimes to get to a message that is gonna represent your boss, and also, people in the district will understand what he's talking about, because here in DC, we can really get in the weeds with policy and procedure. And most people don't care about that outside of here. If we start talking about rules, they're not gonna care.
I think for the day-to-day, I will admit that writing was a bit of a struggle for me in undergrad a little bit, because I tend to write how I speak, and I think a lot of people do that. One of the things that I think is very unique here is you must often write in the voice of your boss. And so you have to know what works for them, how do they communicate, and then use their vernacular, their language. I know for us, we have a very formal boss, and she communicates very formally in writing. And I know for myself, that was a very big adjustment when I started writing her letters, was to capture her voice. And your day-to-day, you're also communicating with attorneys, or you're communicating with committee staffers who oftentimes, and I think you can definitely attest, speak in a completely different language than other human beings, and you have to distill it down a bit to communicate within your office. So there's a lot of, you have to interpret, you have to interpret across industries and different levels of education, honestly, to get your point across and to also be in the voice of your boss.
So basing off this idea of communication, I want to touch on a topic that some people find very intimidating: networking. Could Could you tell me a little bit about kind of what you've seen in terms of like what's worked for you on Capitol Hill, kind of some things that the students might be able to do if they want to reach out to more Hill staffers, they want to connect and learn a little bit more about their work?
So networking on the Hill is probably one of the easiest things to do, but it really takes you being active and wanting to do it. A lot of times, people are reaching out, you know, when we have these conversations, we always say, get to know and like talk to someone and go on LinkedIn and see what connections you have. Use your undergrad, use the Washington Center, use those connections, because everyone who works on the Hill has the same exact standard email. So you can always find someone on LinkedIn that you say like, oh, they went to the Washington Center, you know, they went to my same school, I should reach out. And people on the Hill, there are some people who really enjoy going to get coffees or meeting with you during a recess, and that's the one other benefit of the Hill is you have recess, so you have time where you can do those types of meetings. But it takes the initiative from the person who's either seeking a job or wants career advice or anything like that. So it's really easy to network on the Hill, but you just have to kind of make a point to do it. There are also a lot of happy hours and things on the Hill where you can meet with other interns. The one benefit also of the Washington Center is when you're here, if you're here for a full semester, which was very helpful, at least for me, was I was placed in a room with 4 different girls who all had different internships, all different cross sections of the city. So my one roommate was a Hill intern, and she knew where all the happy hours were and where all the networking was, and I just tagged along with her everywhere I went. But it did take a point to really get to, you know, you have to be outgoing when you want to network, and you also have to understand, you know, there are times that people don't respond back to you. I always tell people if I sit down with them, like, send me your resume, but I'm sorry if I don't email you back for 2 months. Like, please ping me if you know, if you have applied for a job, you know we have a connection. You just have to take that and be proactive. So that's one of the best parts about networking on the Hill or networking in DC is you have so many opportunities here. You just have to find them and do it.
I'll just add to that too. I mean, when you're networking, one huge thing is like when you're talking to someone, don't just kind of just straight up ask like, y'all hiring? You want to get to know them first. Basically, like the whole thing about networking is you want to be able to communicate with someone and kind of get to know them on like a person-to-person basis and not just like kind of think of them as like a pathway to a job. And that's just kind of one thing that I notice with like certain people, like when I'm at events and they're, you know, I can clearly see like they have a mission and they're not wanting to know me, they kind of want to use me for like, you know, to get somewhere. So that's something in which like I would probably tell you is that, you know, just go there and just go as if you're making a friend. I mean, I've met people at networking events who like, I now have friends, you know, I have friendships with them, we hang out, we go get drinks every once in a while or go get lunch sometime. So that's kind of something where if you meet someone at an event and be like, hey, you know, I'd love to pick your brain, like, you know, just kind of see where you got to, where you did. Just kind of go out to them, you know, go get a cup of coffee, you know, go see if they'll go to lunch with you and just kind of be able to just not, I mean, yeah, you can talk about like, you know, their experience and then, you know, see if they know someone and they can help you out in that aspect, but also just making sure that you just kind of have that one-on-one personal level. And another thing that I would also recommend is like get on these like, I remember when I was an intern and also like I still am a part like now in my own legal network, but there's a bunch of listservs you can join, you know, sign up for these email lists and go to these events and just, you know, just try and meet people. And there's tons of stuff that, yeah, there's stuff for people who work on the Hill and there's stuff that, you know, people who work with the Hill are off like me. So that's just something where you do need to like, yeah, just sign up for like notification alerts and just be proactive with that.
And also, I would say look at networking as building a relationship. I actually use a relationship building more than I use the term networking. I think the network is the sum total of these relationships. And there has to be a mutual benefit for the person that you're seeking their advice, and they should get something from you as well. Just because you're a recent graduate and you're speaking to someone that's very senior, in this city specifically, it's very important. you never know, a person never knows when in 2 years' time that person could be their colleague or their boss. This place moves in many different ways. One of the first people I talked to when I got here was the chief of staff for my hometown member. 2 years later, that hometown member lost. That person came back to me after a while of being off the Hill, said, I want to get back on the Hill, and you're there, and I want to see what's available and how I can get back into the game. That gentleman had a 20-year career over me, but that was a relationship that we built. He helped me get my foot in the door. I was able to help him get back into the game, if you will. And that's a friendship. It's a mutually beneficial relationship, and so that's how you should look at it. You know, if you don't want your time wasted, don't waste someone's time. If you want to value your time, you value someone else's time. In this city, it can keep going. My intern coordinator, he's my mentor. I still talk to him, and it's been since 2004. So that's a relationship that's fostered. So you have every opportunity that you meet someone new is a potential to get you to a good place or to a relationship that can be beneficial.
One more thing on that too is, even with networking, so as Moses mentioned, being on listservs, I found this job to be in the Democratic leader's office on a listserv. I had no idea who I was interviewing for. I just showed up at the interview, and one of the days I interviewed with Michael after I found out who it was for, and I used my network to help put in recommendations for me while I was interviewing for this job, but also while talking to Michael during my interviews, I was like, you know what, even if I don't get this job, I know Michael's the type of person that I would want to get to know afterwards, building that relationship with him almost immediately after the interviews while I was still going through the process. And that's something you can do in building on those relationships, but also taking the risks and taking the chances when you're applying from listservs of being like, who from my network will be able to help me and put in a good word for me, or I can get coffee with that I haven't connected with in 10, 15 years and be able to apply for a new job. So those are just other relationships you can use while you're actually going through an interview process or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I should say as well that, you know, many people that are working on the Hill, they remember what it was like to be in your shoes. So they know how tough it is sometimes to, you know, to get that kind of first break, and so they would be willing to have coffee with you. I've, you know, over the years, I mean, I've just randomly emailed people and been like, hey, I'm really interested in learning more about the work your member is doing or the work that, you know, you've done, and a lot of them will take the time to actually meet with you. And then to kind of echo what Michael said, you know, building up that relationship over time. And then even if it's just sending them a note saying, hey, I studied abroad this semester, you know, even if it's not an immediate thing, and that's kind of building up so that then when they have a job opening or they have, you know, a line on some new work, they might think, oh yeah, I remember that person that emailed me a while ago. We've touched a little bit on this over the last, you know, few minutes, but just to make it its own special question, we've talked about networking do's. Let's talk about some networking don'ts. Are there any like major things off the top of your head that you can think of that are either pet peeves when people reach out to you, or you know, anything like that that a student should avoid definitely?
Do not show up without questions. If you are meeting someone, take the time before you meet them to get to know what they do, who they work for, what you're interested in. I've had several people I've agreed to meet for coffee, and they sit there and expect me to talk the whole time. And as much as I like talking most of the time, I don't necessarily want to take 45 minutes out of my work day to talk about myself, most of the time.
Yeah, if you are at a networking event, just remember that a first impression is a lasting impression. So if you're at a big event, don't get drunk. So like, cause people remember that, like, it's like, oh yeah, you're the dude that like, you know, had a little bit too much and was like wobbling around. Or like, you know, you get too intoxicated and you say something which you shouldn't have said. So I've both been on the receiving end of that and, you know, and on the giving side of that. So just always remember that the circle in DC, like, it's really, really small. And like, so like I have people who like, yeah, I have colleagues who, you know, I knew them when I first came here years ago, and they said that, you know, just because of one thing they did, like, you know, it kind of affected how people viewed them within like the very tight circle, like, of the network that you're in. So especially when you get into niche things, when you're in committees and stuff like that, or even outside the Hill. So, so just always remember that.
I would say when not everyone is going to be helpful or your friend. Take the hint if they are not interested in helping. And know that that's not something that you particularly did. Like, don't take it personally, but also don't take that into the next person who is going to help you. So, for example, some people, I believe, they have very strong opinions about what we do. Everyone in this town has an opinion about politics, your boss, etc. Hold on to those feelings, but don't express them during the time where you're meeting with that individual. It's a turnoff. And it also cuts off the possibility that they can actually be helpful. So while this is a political town, there's time for politics and there's a time to make friends, and sometimes those two don't mix well. So just make sure you're fully aware of when those times are.
My big thing is don't just get to the point. Don't say, I'm here because I need a job, or what can you do to help me in this? It's an immediate turn off, and I never continue the conversation. I'm like, great, it was great to meet you. But really know, and also know, yes.
Don't hire him.
Yeah. Know the person you are going with, know their value, but also know how much time that they have. Don't waste the person's time. So when I say don't just get to the point, know that you need to eventually. So don't just blab for 10 minutes and then ask all about them and then finally get your answer, because then you've just wasted 30 minutes and that person might not want to talk to you anymore. So you have to find a happy medium there. But yeah, really don't come out and just say, are you hiring? Because you immediate, you're done.
One is be exciting, like don't be boring. Like, there's something unique about all of you and something that actually is like makes you like angry or passionate. Bring in a respectful way, bring that to the interview. Show that you're passionate about something, right? So like if you, like healthcare or whatever, like if there's some issue that you feel really passionate about and want to explore, it's okay if you let the person that you're talking to know that, because it's kind of fun to be like, oh, okay, this person's driven. I can think of people on the Hill that I know that might be interested in talking with them and kind of building up those relationships. Secondly, LinkedIn. I love connecting with people on LinkedIn. If you connect with me on LinkedIn and don't send a note and I don't know who you are, I'm not going to accept you. So, a lot of people, in terms of Hill, I've reached out to people just cold, emailing them. I will always include a note and just be like, hey, I met you here, I know this. Very easy. It's my soapbox. I'll get off it now. All right. We do want to leave some time for some questions, so let's kind of open it up here. Whoever's got, we've got some mics, which I guess we're using those. Is that right? Sure. All right. Awesome. Or if you just can speak loud, that's fine.
I was just over here.
Go for it.
Hi, my name is George Moon. Oh, is this even on?
Oh, bottom. Check the bottom.
Check the bottom. Oh, it's off. Yeah, there we go. Let's try it now. Oh yeah, there we go. My name is George Mosier. I'm a senior at Quinnipiac University. When it came to networking, I was wondering if there are any events going on tonight for my last night in UC.
It's Friday, just go to 14th Street.
All right.
Actually, I don't even know. The fun thing on the Hill is, well, yesterday was when all the members left. So a lot of staff are kind of, relaxing at this point, I'd like to say, but some of our interns, I think, are in here by now.
You can try, there's quite a few bars right around the house side where house staffers like to frequent sometimes, so trying like Bull Feathers or Hawk and Dove. Am I allowed to give out bar names? I don't know.
Yeah, provided you are of age, on Pennsylvania Avenue, right across from the Library of Congress, there's a couple of poorhouses always. So yes, exactly. Eating establishments. But actually, just so I can say, what's the best way for is there like a publication or anything that comes out that has a list of specifically receptions, not just nightlife, but trade associations that come, because those are great networking opportunities too.
Sometimes you can find on roll call. You can find, they used to really publish them in paper every day. But there are roll call, and there used to be there's a website called Closure Club. That is it was a driven website by staffers that would post them. There used to be an intern site during the summer, especially if you're a summer internship. Lots of things come out from either, not just the programs, but the interns themselves. There's programs on the Hill specifically that is sort of broadcast widely throughout DC. I know there are programming that occurs like at the Kennedy Center, at the Smithsonian, that they provide during those, at least during the summers. While you're here, I think sometimes you can easily go and find briefings or anything related to your subject matter. If you go to a trade association website of something that you're interested in, or if you are looking around, there's there's like any other major city, there's your local websites that tell you about events. Like we've got, Popville and DCist and Washingtonian, and those publications that can tell you about social events that actually have an angle, a professional angle to it. So oftentimes if you read a little bit between the lines and say, oh, this trade association is having a convention, there's lots of people in town, there's an opportunity for me to meet folks there, they're having a ball or a gala or a reception, oftentimes, and especially in the Hill, there's reception culture everywhere, where this guy allows people to come if the rules are attended to. But lots of organizations come to the Capitol all the time, and in the Capitol buildings, you can generally walk around and see what's interesting, and see if it's an invite only or not, and poke your head in and see who's around.
And if you end up working for an office, the staffers in that office are probably gonna go to some of these events, and if you ask them nicely, they may take you to it, depending on who's gonna be there and kind of what the invitation looks like. So definitely, if you end up coming back to DC and interning for an office, make friends.
And then another thing I just quickly add, it's just, there's like sites like there's Facebook groups and stuff like that like you can find, like a lot of some of the networking events that I found like were on Facebook events that I saw like my mutual friends like were going to. So that's something. And then LinkedIn, they also have like groups you can join, and they'll put something up and be like, hey, come meet everyone or people who have the same interests as you at this location at this time. So yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Austin, also a senior at Quinnipiac. So I'm just curious, as I'm looking for a job now and hopefully in DC, is there any recommendations you would give for like if I was like getting the first job at like a nonpartisan organization and going to a partisan organization or vice versa? Like, is that harmful to like work at a partisan place first and trying through a nonpartisan organization? And if it is harmful, is there any way to kind of mitigate that when you're going from one job to another?
I'll take a crack at it. Advice I've heard is you get to switch sides once. If you are gonna switch, it's once. So if you're not quite sure where you fall, which is completely fine and understandable, and that's probably good for our country if people are questioning where they fall and not just picking a side at this point. But I don't think there is gonna be a difference if you start off at a nonpartisan organization and then go to a partisan one, but you just have to avoid trying to go from one side to the other. But if it's nonpartisan and then partisan, it doesn't matter.
I mean, I'd probably say, yeah. I mean, the thing is, like, I would say it's easier maybe going nonpartisan to partisan, just because, like, if you're an independent, and you really don't have a side, then it's easier if you want to go to a Democrat organization or a Republican organization. In terms of just in doing the opposite, that's also like, that's pretty easy to do because then you're going nonpartisan. Even though there's some places that claim that they're nonpartisan, even though they're nonpartisan. So I think that just making sure that just kind of see where you're at and just see what will benefit you in terms of just long term. If it's something where you eventually want to get there, then maybe starting off nonpartisan might be the best thing to do. But if you want to right out the gate kind of be active, then maybe partisan might be the decision for you.
Yeah, I think the general rule of thumb is that you get to switch once, but I think if you do switch and you're applying for, say, a job in the speaker's office, and you're applying from, you were Republican, went to a different organization, and then you wanted to switch, being able to explain why you're doing that switch, being able to explain those in your cover letter. If a job is, if an application is saying you don't need to write a cover letter, but you do have a switch like that, submit a cover letter and do the extra work so you can explain any of those switches. Because sometimes I look at resumes and I just actually like, I'm just curious as to how this even got on my desk. But, you know, if you have that in a cover letter, you know, someone might bring you in because they're curious too, and that could lead to a job, but you just have to be able to explain if you're switching back and forth.
Yeah, it also depends on, I guess, the kind of organization that you're going back and forth to. I had a student years ago who was applying for a job at the Service Employees International Union, SEIU, as an organizer. And she was interning on the Hill for a guy named Congressman Trent Franks, if anybody knows who he is, who is perhaps the polar opposite of, very conservative Republican, and that she was applying to a very liberal organization. So she had to kind of figure out, okay, is this even something that, will they even consider me with that sort of thing? But yeah, good point.
Thank you.
Hi there, my name's Josh. I'm also a senior from Quinnipiac. I was just wondering if you all had any DC or Hill specific tips for interviews.
We'll say, before you go into any personal office interview, please look up the member. Even if you're going in to be an intern, if you can speak to that member's biggest piece of legislation or one of their biggest piece of legislation, you will be far and above any other candidate. If you can say, let's say you're interested in transportation and you're coming to interview for my boss who's been on the transportation committee for 6 years. If you know what he's done in that committee and can say like, oh, I really like surface transportation, whatever that means, I don't know. But if you can speak to that, you're gonna get the attention of that office. So having a few bills up your sleeve, knowing what they do, and you can find that on their website. So you can go to Congressman Scott Perry, Transportation Surface Infrastructure, and we'll have press releases that pop up that will do the work for you and explain exactly why the member took that position and why he introduced the bill, so.
I would say make sure that when you're having your interview and envision it as a conversation, because you can also control the tenor of that conversation. All of the helpful tips that people give you, the sit up straight, the hold a fake ball in front of you, all of those measures, all those practices are great for your presentation. However, people really want to know who you are, especially if you're an entry-level position on the Hill specifically. Everyone has similar set of background. You have a 4-year degree or more, you're coming here to work, you're passionate about what you're doing, there's a reason why you want to do this. What makes you different? And why do you fit into this team? So I would also use this as an interview as an opportunity to ask the questions about the work environment to make sure that you're a fit. Oftentimes it really just comes down to everyone here is smart and they can do the work, but what makes you really fit into the organization, I think is the biggest, sometimes biggest hurdle while you're just simply trying to answer the basic questions. Also, especially on the Hill, because I know you haven't interviewed a little bit, the person you're probably interviewing in an entry level is only 4 years older than you. So they were in your shoes not too long ago. So all of the things that they know that can trip you up, they're probably going to throw it at you. Just don't worry about it. Have the conversation. And again, just make sure that your unique talents shine through it.
If you're a nervous interviewer, practice. Because I think that's on the Hill, jobs do turn over a lot. So, the people who are interviewing interview a lot of people. And I know from my experience in interviewing for staff assistants, if you're nervous, it just is a complete turn off because you don't want that in your office, when especially if you're the face of the office for a lot of these entry-level positions. So if you are a nervous interviewer, you need to practice. And if you're not comfortable practicing with friends, practice on your own. Practice, just do something so that you're not coming into an interview shaky, that you can hold up a conversation. But also for the help, people are gonna trip you up and people are gonna ask wild questions just to see how you react. Have some sort of answer, whether it's like, I really don't know, but I will, have something that you can say, but also have a little bit of knowledge about the Hill. Either whether you're applying for a Democrat or a Republican, know the leadership. Be able to go in and name the top leadership of the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. Have some sort of simple background about the Hill, but yet definitely know your number that you're applying for.
And if you don't know the answer to a question, just say you don't know.
Yeah.
It's so much better than trying to make it up, especially because people do throw curveballs at you. And a lot of offices will do what I said, is be like, can you name a piece of legislation from that member? And if you don't know, you can't make it up. Like, you can't just make up legislation. So just say you don't know, and you're gonna be way better off, and like pivot that, be like, I don't know, but I really admire his work on the transportation committee, or I don't know, make something up, just say you don't know.
And also, Congress is full of acronyms and shorthand speech, so having a passing familiarity with that, like knowing the different roles in an office and how they're abbreviated, LA, LC, LD, COS, that sort of thing, could be very helpful. You don't have to speak like them necessarily, but just knowing when they were, refer to approps, what does that mean? Who are ledge counsel and what do they do? Just shorthand like that can kind of help sort of them envision you fitting perfectly in on day one.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Hello, my name's Stephen Cangelosi. I'm also a senior at Quinnipiac University.
Wait, are you guys getting graded for this?
I think some groups are. So my question to you is, obviously networking is a major part of anything that you're trying to do on the Hill, and making sure you have those connections. However, I would imagine, although maybe it's glamorized in television, movies, and media, it still is a very competitive space to work in. So how do you compete in this kind of environment while maintaining your networks and helping you to advance your own career?
That's a good one. I can go for this. I have a network of individuals that were built out of friendship first, but we are all competitive. We're not necessarily competitive to one another. We complement each other a lot. However, there will be times where you're competing in the same space, perhaps for the same job, or you may have, especially if you're on the Hill, you may have bosses with competing priorities. I think that is when you really sort of siphon off you have the professional side. Your name, if you're working for a member of Congress or a senator, your name is not on the door. Okay, their name is on the door. You're serving their constituents, and you're serving their priorities and what their agenda is. That's what you sign up for. That's you're a public servant. You're serving the public. If what your job is doing conflicts with the job that your friend is doing, hopefully that person has the same attitude of public service as you. So it's one of those, it's an old school saying, it's not personal, it's business. A lot of people say that, I think that, especially among staff, they say DC is so cutthroat and no one gets along anymore. I disagree with it when it comes to staff. Every staffer on this Hill, when the last vote happens at 10:30 or 11 on a Thursday, everyone is on the same page. We want to get out of Dodge, we want to go home, but we live here. We're neighbors, we're friends, we're colleagues. So there will be times, I think the best thing to do to maintain that though is, for example, sometimes you can give your friends a heads up. Hey, there's a bill that I'm introducing that's gonna undercut what your boss did. I'm telling you as a friend, but I'm still having to go through it because this is my job. So, granted, you have to have some discretion in that, but if your real network is there for the benefit of your professional development and your career, your success is based off of their success as well. So even if sometimes you're doing things in conflict with one another and you might be on two different paths, make sure that the core goals of why you're connected are still there. It's to make sure that everyone is okay. Bosses come and go. Staffers are always here. Your boss could lose in 2 years, and that same person who you're working against could help you get that next job. So always maintain your network is also yours. It can be used to the benefit of your boss, but that is your network. So you have to work to maintain it.
And I will add that probably the most successful people in this environment are those that can separate the person from the politics. And that goes for both here and in Arlington, where I happen to live, or down the street, or wherever you live. If you cannot separate politics from a person, you're gonna come across those people here and they're not gonna be fun to deal with. So learning how to do that in your personal life or at school or a job now is really gonna help you when you get here.
All right. Thank you very much.
My name is Troy McDonald. I'm with Harvard Extension. So my question is, kind of related to networking, you were talking about connecting in DC, but for those who don't live in DC, what are the best tips to kind of break in here, right, and to make those connections? Some say to put on your resume that you are already in DC and almost lie on your resume. So I'm curious about the tips that you've come across from those outside of DC trying to break in.
This comes up a lot for me. I think it's hard. I tell people if you want to be in DC, you need to be here. Unless you are applying for an organization that is not political. If you are going for the RNC or the DNC or any of the downtown headquarters or maybe a law firm, I think those places you can apply traditionally like you would apply anywhere else. I think a lot of things, especially Hill people, they want to see that you're already here and that you're committed, because oftentimes they're hiring very quickly. They don't have the opportunity to wait for you to get your moving expenses done, whatever. So that tip of putting it on your resume, that also comes with a little bit of a background. Make sure you can get here as quickly as you can if you are at a distance. Oftentimes, Emily will interview 25 people. If you can't make it on Tuesday at 5 o'clock, you don't have an interview. So I had an intern who was in Florida, and he knew that if he had to call for an interview, he had to get on a plane and get up here as soon as possible. He managed to do it, thank goodness, but not everyone has those resources. So I say get here first if this is what you want to do. Outside organizations, you can still apply through their traditional channels, and I think you'll still find success. But with the networking piece, I think it's a little bit more challenging unless you have some frequency within the city. That's been my experience.
And I'll go back to LinkedIn. I've had a few people that live in Pennsylvania and go to colleges there reach out to me on LinkedIn and say, hey, my name's Joe and I like your boss and would you be willing to do a phone call with me? And I've done some of them. Not everyone's gonna respond to those messages, but I personally come from a place of wanting to give back because everyone's been in your position, and if you're not in DC and you don't have the resources to be here, we understand that. It's an expensive city to live in, especially when you're young. And so reaching out on LinkedIn and having those connections of like the college you went to, organizations, and pointing that out, you might find someone that's willing to get on a phone call with you.
For a job right away and are able to take an internship, if you're able to come here for a semester, if you're able to do that, or after you graduate to be able to take an internship for the summer, that you were able to be here and be applying for jobs and being proactive and being able to do that, that's, you know, if you have an end date, like I need to go home on X date, and I can't afford to live in the city past that date, that also helps kind of motivate you to keep applying and keep interviewing and doing that. But one other, my home state rep, she hires a lot of people that are from her district that currently live there, that have ended up being able to come to DC and going through that channel. So your best in sometimes to either come to the Hill or come to DC is to come through your home state rep. And then if you eventually want to go into leadership or to go somewhere else in DC, that's fine, but that's a route in, is being able to start at home first, rep or senator, and then, because they'll always want to see, Pennsylvania too, they'll always want to see for me, the Pennsylvania connection. That will get you into the Senate, that will get you into your rep. But if you don't have that and you don't have that ability to be able to do that, you know, trying to come and do the internship, and that's why the Washington Center was so important to me. I wasn't able to, you know, just take off and be able to come here and be able to apply from here. When I was at the Washington Center, I was actively applying for jobs so that I knew I had an end date, and then I was able to get a job and stay here. But also some people come here for school, and you know, if you want to come and get a master's degree, if you want to come after school, you can come here for a semester and continue. I got my master's degree and worked full time, but I came to DC to get my master's degree. I didn't come here for a job. I luckily got a job before I moved here, but you can always use that as well as something else to be able to do, and then continue to work on your networking while you're here for school. That's another option.
And if you don't agree with your home district's members' politics, find someone in your state who does align with your politics and reach out to them and say, hey, I'm in so-and-so's district, I don't agree with them, I agree with you, can I please come work for you? That's also a very successful tactic. But we didn't talk about this, so I started off, my member was my home state district member. I started off as an intern for him. I got hired as the legislative correspondent, then I was promoted to LA, and then now I'm comms director. So that is a very powerful way to get on the Hill, granted that you agree with them.
Thank you.
How are we doing on time, by the way, for those who have the room? Okay, so do we have time for one more quick one? One quick question? Okay. Okay. All right. Anybody?
Anybody that's not Quinnipiac?
All right, we're gonna do a lightning round real quick. This is gonna be 40 seconds for each of you. Transport yourself back to before you got to the Hill. What's one piece of advice you wish you knew then that you don't now? Pressure's on.
I will say that a piece of advice I wish I knew is that everyone was once in your shoes. So don't be afraid to talk to people. They're gonna understand if you're nervous, if you're not quite sure how the procedure works, the lingo works. Just get out there and be you. That's also very important. No matter how you show up or if you're shy or extroverted, you just have to be yourself. And if you're like that, then people, will tend to like you.
For me, it was, I didn't intern on the Hill. I had no idea what I was doing when I got here. But everyone told me you can't get a job on the Hill unless you've interned on the Hill. So I was so scared to apply to the Hill because I hadn't been an intern. And I wish I would have known earlier that didn't matter. And I think, yes, being an intern on the Hill does help, but if you have credentials and you can speak for yourself and you can network and you can do all of that, you're gonna be just fine and you'll succeed on the Hill. But really, I wish I would have just known that earlier because I would have come to the Hill probably sooner than I did. But I just thought it was a place I could never go because I never was an intern here.
So, get out of your head about the preconceived notions of this place. I mean, it's a city run by 25-year-olds, and people play soccer after work. So don't get the yes, there are a lot of important things that happen here, and yes, there are a lot of important people, etc. But you are just as talented as every single person that comes to this city every single day. So take the things that you bring and embrace it, and take it to every opportunity and every job and interview that you have, and get out of your head about it. Just go, do your thing, get the job, do exactly what you want to do, and don't let people intimidate you to do something different.
Actually, you mentioned sports, that's a great way to network.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they do have
Sport.
kickball leagues, I think, for interns and stuff like that. But but I think for me, I think that just having an open mind and making sure that, just if you don't, just always keep your mind open. For me, I was very close-minded. I was like, always, I just thought, hey, I want to get into politics. And I thought that working on the Hill was something that, that I wanted to do. And so for me, it was basically, I interned, at TWC. And, I thought that I wanted to come back. And for me, it was like, okay, well, I thought that that's what I wanted at the end. But I was like, I think actually I want to be more involved with just maybe the campaigns themselves, because it wasn't cracked up what I thought it was going to be. And so for me it was like, okay, well I want to get involved with election law, campaign finance, knew I wanted to be a lawyer, and then coming back and then finding my roots there. And actually I was able to get my job at the Republican Governors Association through someone who I interned with back in 2012. So, and this was 2015, this is 3 years later. So, keeping those connections and those friendships, like I said, and always keeping in touch is something definitely to do once you leave, even if you don't live here like I did, because I was only here for a semester. So just kind of making sure that, if something doesn't go your way and this might not be what you planned, it's not the end of the world. Thanks.
Awesome, thank you. Well, a huge round of applause for our panelists.